Christ. The topic of Christianity in the Middle East could be very long and very detailed. I'm not going to do that tonight too much. I'd like to give you a brief overview and then recommend to you, if you have not seen the issue called One, published by the Catholic Near East Welfare Association in New York. I'll give you their address in a bit. They took the September issue and published it about the Christians in the Middle East, country by country, with a socio-political idea, what's going on, the religious idea, the numbers, focusing on the patriarchs of these churches. They did this mainly because of the synod that was going on in Rome, convoked by His Holiness Pope Benedict, for the bishops of the Middle East, and some experts, of course, and a variety of peoples, which went on from October 10th to the 26th or 27th. And it was very well done. A lot of discussions took place and a lot of participation from the bishops and from clergy, and even some lay people were involved in it. When we speak about the Middle East today, we're actually speaking really about the Near East, although it's been dubbed finally the Middle East, because the Far East being more of the Asian countries, we don't speak about one particular country. We speak of a variety of countries, mainly the Holy Land, which is made up of Palestine, of course modern Israel to the north, Jordan, Syria and Lebanon, and they formed during the Ottoman times of 400 years a province under the Ottomans called Greater Syria, those areas. Remember, up until the modern era, to the contemporary times, until the 20s and 30s and 40s, after World War I, none of these areas were totally independent. None of them ever had governments of their own. They were always under subjection to someone. From the Romans, to the Byzantines, to the Muslims, back to the Byzantines, to a variety of Islamic groups, to Turks, and then after World War I, and the downfall of the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, they became mandated areas under Western powers. France and England, mainly, took power over them. And little by little, they carved out, the Western powers, carved out the modern-day countries that we know today as Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, Iraq. These were all carved out by Western powers. They attempted to carve out two countries in the 40s, Palestine and Israel, and it didn't work out. Israel declared independence and a war broke out, and we're still living under that pain since those days. But in this whole area that we're talking about is where Christianity was born and grew and developed for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years. Of course, we know that Christ was born in Bethlehem. He was raised in Nazareth. And from there, he began to preach in what is presently what we call the Holy Land, but also in these other countries that formed part of it. He did get into southern Lebanon and into Jordan, and probably into certain areas in Syria that touched upon that. So it wasn't just what we call Palestine and Israel today that he was involved with. The freedom of Christianity came in the early Roman and Byzantine Empire by Constantine in the year 313. Now Christianity was free to live. And soon after that, another emperor made it the religion of the empire. It was very unique that the empire and religion were one. And we still have that remnant going on today in the Middle East, where politics and countries are related with religion. It was very, very strong under the Ottoman times, when the Ottoman Turks ruled not just the Middle East, but even up into the Balkan countries. They appointed the heads of each church as a political leader to keep everything subdued. And the heads of the church, the bishops or the patriarchs, wherever they may be, were the civil heads of their church under the Ottomans, and handled all civil powers other than death. If somebody committed a death or murdered somebody or killed somebody, then the Ottomans took over at that point. We, coming from a country here, particularly in the United States, and also from European countries, Western European countries, that didn't have the strong connection of church and state. There were some, of course, in the past, but they faded, and then particularly in this country, we don't see it. It's hard for us to comprehend how we can have church and state as one. But it's still going on over there. So when we talk about the freedom of these Christians, it was born there. It was born there. And in the early days, there were hundreds of dioceses. A diocese was a grouping of a variety of villages and cities into a diocese, and we call it eparchy sometimes. And bishops sat there, and they had their different churches. There were hundreds of them, but they mainly disappeared. They mainly disappeared during the time of the Islamic invasion. Came from the south and moved up, and through many bad ways, also Christians were taken over to Islam, and many of these dioceses, most of them that existed, have all disappeared into what we call today titular dioceses. When an auxiliary bishop is named, he needs a seat, so they give him the name of a diocese that existed in the past. Mine is Gerasa, which is the city of modern-day Jarash in Jordan, and that's where Christ, we just heard the gospel recently, 2 weeks ago, where Christ expelled the demons from the guys, or from, we actually have two stories, but they're similar, from the guy who was possessed, and he put him into the pigs, and the pigs jumped off the cliff and drowned in the water. Well, so jokingly, many times, when people ask me, what are you bishop of? I tell them, I'm bishop of the pigs. But thank God they died in the water. The breakdown, if we look at it today, includes Palestine, which is the west, at least the West Bank. All of what is modern-day Israel was all called Palestine at one time, whether it was Arab or Jew. It didn't really matter. It was Palestine. Lebanon, Syria, Cyprus, although it was very Greek, still was so close to Lebanon that it was considered in the Middle East. Modern-day Israel, Turkey, which was in the early church known as Mesopotamia. It was that large piece of land, which is Turkey today, and it was made up of Armenia and Turkey. Armenia is somewhat connected to the Middle East, although not fully. It's more of an independent church that it developed from two different traditions in the Middle East, but went on their own. The countries of Egypt, of course, northern Africa was considered the same thing, Egypt, and Constantinople, present-day Istanbul, was in that same area, and Iraq in Iran, which were part of the Persian Empire at one time, the Babylonians, and then the the Persian Empire, and then the Arabic Peninsula, which goes down into Saudi Arabia, okay, and all of the smaller little kingdoms that they have there, Qatar and Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait, Oman and Yemen. All of this is what we generally lump together in the Middle East. If we recognize, and we do, that Christ founded his church in Jerusalem, at least attempting to modify